Back doing prospect reviews here on Locked On Pacers, looking at Memphis center Jalen Duren today, one of the more polarizing prospects at the top of this draft, which surprises me after watching him that he's polarizing. We'll break it all down today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the Westside Community News. And today we're back on our trend of not talking about the Pacers at all. We're going to dive back into draft prospects. Pacers have their highest pick in 3 decades. Could be some movement in this draft, given how it's tiered off, given how the Pacers' needs might be. So I'm trying to cover a lot of lottery guys, and today we're doing just that with Jalen Duren from Memphis, the center, and joining me to help break down a prospect that I thought is weirdly polarizing. I've seen people rank him behind Mark Williams and things like that. That surprised me after watching his tape. Derek Murray, as NBA scout and advisor for NXTPRO Hoops, Babcock Hoops, and basketball news all over the place. This man is traveling, I think, to every state in the United States at some point in the last 30 days. Derek, how you doing, man?
Tony, I appreciate you having me on. Travels, man, I feel like I'm never home. It's kind of nice with the draft wrapping up here in about a month. I won't have to hear it from my wife anymore. But for the time being, it's fun, and I appreciate you having me and jumping on to talk about Duren a little bit.
Yeah, Duren is very interesting when you watch Memphis, because the thing that stands out the most to me before we get into any skill is, I knew he was 6'11", air quotes there, because I don't think he's actually 6'11", but tall and 250 pounds. That's all I knew before watching tape. He does not move like a 250-pound person, and a lot of the basis of why I think he'll be a pretty good player, and a lot of the stuff we'll talk about for his strengths here, is that he is really mobile for his size, and that kind of allows him to both be a bully and a speedster. I think that kind of cooks into a lot of what makes him a good prospect. But give me the pitch, the sales pitch, the high-level overview of what makes Duren a lottery guy in this year's draft.
Yeah, Duren is like one of the ultimate guys. You get right up next to him in person, and you just buy in immediately based on, honestly, the eye candy of a 6'10", 250-pound physical specimen who moves really, really well and has a 7'5" wingspan. Probably one of the guys in this draft, as far as a pure physical profile, stands at the top. If you were just ranking players by that, arguably could actually be, the guy in this class. So physical specimen, extremely explosive. He's going to be a good play finisher in the NBA. He's a lob threat, runs the floor really, really well, mobile for his size and weight. Impacts the game with his weight, his athleticism, the agility at 250, uses his shoulders well, powerful lower body. Everything, even kind of the upside and the floor, are all attached to the physical traits. So that's kind of, that's the buy-in there for Duren. I think his range is anywhere from 8 to 14, 15. That's probably where I'd set the range there for him kind of going into the draft.
Yeah, we'll start on the offensive side of the ball, and like a lot of you covered the high level stuff. The physical profile is insane, the agility is insane, and that kind of allows him to not, but despite being 6'10", 250, I would like to give Penny Hardaway and Memphis a lot of credit. A lot of teams, when they have giant dudes in college basketball, they're like, all right, 10 feet and in, don't come out of that circle. Memphis did not do that. Duren was everywhere on the offensive side. He would catch behind the 3-point line. They allowed him to dribble. They allowed him to operate. And so I'm not going to necessarily say like he's the best on-ball creator of all time or anything like that, but definitely a solid, especially for that size, guy with the ball, and pretty good in space on the defensive end. So because he's mobile and they trusted him away from the rim, that kind of allowed him to show off a lot of skills. And so the first thing I thought was kind of interesting from him as an offensive player is he's really varied in his attacks, right? Sometimes he will drive all the way to the basket. Sometimes he'll pull up for a jumper, which he's not afraid of. That's good and bad. And he can go over both shoulders. He doesn't shoot a lot of threes, but he would shoot from basically anywhere, even though he has stronger areas than others. And I thought that kind of varied approach was really interesting for a guy that, has such dominant physical tools. He wasn't just so reliant on using them to score all the time.
Yeah, so forgive me. I was looking at my other screen here. I was pulling up his synergy. 25% of his possessions were on post-ups, 19.5 were on cuts, 18 on offensive rebounds, 13 in the transition, and 11% as a pick and roll guy. So yeah, he's not a traditional big in that sense. You don't just post him up over and over. You don't just put him on the elbow over and over. He's comfortable in DHOs, can the ball off. Really good spurts. Like he's got good feel as far as knowing when to attack the rim when he's off the ball. My one issue with him offensively is that he took 1 3-pointer the whole season. And as we've seen in today's NBA, I think you do need to be able to stretch the floor a little bit to really unlock a ceiling as a big man there. But again, his ability to not just be purely one-dimensional, he's not only scoring within 3 or 4 feet of the goal. I do think makes him intriguing, especially with how big he is right now. And sorry to jump in again, he's going to be 18.6 on draft night, which is one of, if not the youngest player in the class.
I wish people describe my age with decimal points. That would make me feel a lot younger all the time. I am 27.2. I don't know what the numbers are, but I like that way of doing it for prospects. It is important to know that he is super young, which is a big part of this. And I agree that the no 3 thing is concerning. Wait, where was it? Like a right wing 3? I have this shot chart right in front of me. Yeah. He bricked a right wing 3, ruined everything. It could have been 0 for 0. He does take long 2s, but not 3s. So I'll be curious how that translates, and we'll talk about that later as an NBA skill, because he did not pretty often, maybe once or twice a game, I would say. Like he would set up a man with a 3 dribble move and then just shoot from like 18 feet, and I was kind of like, oh, okay, you can just destroy this dude, but you pulled up. So maybe it'll translate, I would say, about a shot. I don't think he'll ever be a 3-point shooter. Like nothing about his free throw percentage or the way he plays makes me think he'll be a guy that stretches, but I don't think he'll be like a 0 spacer, if that makes any sense, just because of that long 2.
Yeah, and with the long 2s, again, what that tells me is he's comfortable taking them. Whether it's a big taking long 2s, whether it's taking 3s, I would rather you go 0 for 20 in a season than go 0 for 0. I just need to know that you're comfortable at least attempting them and taking them. And that's where the long 2s, even though a lot of teams, especially in the NBA, they're not going to let you take that shot. It was comforting to me that you wanted to. Isaiah Stewart, Zeke Naji were both guys that took a lot of long 2s in their offensive systems that didn't want them to do so. And they're both projecting as decent shooters right now at the next level too.
The next Duren skill that is eye-popping, offensive rebounds. My gosh, this dude is a vacuum suck around the basket. If his team missed, he's getting it. And this kind of plays into another skill that he has that's not so niche and specific. He has really good hands. Like when he's rolling to the basket or moving around for catches, a lot of bigs have bad hands. He has great hands. He catches a lot of passes and a lot of lobs. He grabs the ball every time it comes off the rim. That's extra possessions for his team, and that's high-quality possessions when he's involved in the action because he's got such strong hands. After watching Isaiah Jackson for the Pacers this season, who has pretty good hands and is able to jump out of the gym, you see the value of strong hands for guys who can fly like that. Like it just adds another. They talk about vertical spacing a lot as an NBA skill, and that's great if you can jump really high. But you got to be able to catch the ball or do something with it. And Duren can certainly do that, and that makes him really fascinating to me as an extra skill that off of misses and off of actions where he's kind of involved as a screener, he can really grab the ball and make something happen.
Yeah, he's going to take a lot of space, just like you said, on that offensive glass. Because not only does he have the good hands, he's got a 7'5" wingspan. So he's going to move you with his lower body. He's going to body you and be able to dislodge you where you are. And then he has the length and he has the hands. Like I do expect him to be an absolute monster on the glass on both ends, probably within 2 or 3 years. If not one, year one, he comes in, he's going to be physically ready to go like day one. If the motor is there on both ends, that's to me one of the things we need to see and see if that can translate and be there all the time. If it is, you're going to have a potentially elite rebounder like right off the bat.
The last thing I want to point out here before I'll defer to you for some final strengths, recoveries and blocks in general, but recoveries was really the highlight point for me on this. You can look at his block numbers and go, oh yes, he's obviously good at blocks. His block percentage is like fake. It's like 10% or something ridiculous. But it's a way he gets them, right? Even if he's a step beat, which sometimes can be bad, that he is a step beat in general, but he can get down to the rim or over from the weak side, wherever he happens to be, and still block the shot. He did that quite often. I thought that was really impressive. So if he's a step quicker with the reads or gets a little more defensive instinct ingrained into his head, and he's not recovering as much, all of a sudden he's in the right spot and getting more blocks or making more stops. That was really impressive to me that he was able to stay in plays that he was sometimes out of and still make it a positive for his team with his defensive capabilities.
Yeah, among freshmen in this draft class, I believe he's behind only Chet in block percentage. You're right, it was like 10-something, which is ridiculous. But again, it's because he moves so well. He changes speeds well, changes directions well. similarly to what we saw with Achua coming out of Memphis, where even though all the reads probably weren't there for Achua, the feel for the game just wasn't really there. He could recover because of the physical tools. I think Duren has considerably better feel at this point in his development than even Achua did. So on defense, I think he's going to be able to hedge and recover. I think he can blitz. He's got the length to be able to drop when you need him to. That's some serious versatility in the pick and roll, which I think, again, makes him super valuable, especially with the way you want bigs to move on that end of the floor today.
Any strengths you would add that we have not covered yet?
I think he passes pretty well out of the post and on the elbow. It's not like he's no looking all the time or anything like that, not throwing, one-handed behind the thing, but he's reliable. He sees the cutters. He doesn't miss a lot of people, which I think is important, where even if that seems basic because it's a stationary pass, he does have good feel for the flow of the offense and can make reads, which I think is valuable as well.
After doing Keegan Murray last week, not that Keegan's a bad passer, but Duren's definitely more, better at those reads to me at least, especially out of the post. So the baseline of Keegan is unfair for comparing guys for passing, but I agree with you that Duren definitely makes good reads from the post, and I think that ability to read the game is always a nice basis for prospects to have on both ends of the floor. I've said this way too many times doing prospect breakdowns, but like Ben Simmons comes in with like genius level defensive reads, right? And his offense wasn't that great yet, but you kind of knew it was going to get there because he can already read the game and has the pattern recognition. That will come on the other end of the floor. That's going to be true for a lot of guys in the NBA level.
It's one of the reasons that going into the LaMelo Ball draft, although the defense for LaMelo was a huge problem in his evaluation, part of me looked at, okay, he clearly has elite vision and reads and control of the floor on offense. So on defense, if you can get him to lock in, he already sees what's going on. Like he's already there. He feels it. It's how can you get him to lock in? So yeah, I sometimes try to, I won't say give the benefit of the doubt, but I'm hopeful when a player reads well on one end of the floor that you can get that to translate to the other side.
Yeah, Marianne Stanley, the Fever head coach here in Indianapolis, always talks about like, give me players who can see and have vision. I'll teach them I can teach them the rest of that. And she got that from another coach, I think she said, but like, I agree with that. That's a good way of putting it. If you can have vision and make reads, like that's really valuable. The rest of the stuff is a little easier to teach once you have that baseline down. Hey guys, let's take one short little break to talk about Built Bar, who are making the best tasting protein bars ever. We've been asking, and Built Bar finally delivered. They have granola bars now as well. But what makes Built Bar so great is they make the best tasting protein bars out there. 100% covered in chocolate, soft, easy to chew, delicious protein bars. They come in so many different flavors that there's something for everybody. It is definitely the most popular product that we've talked about on Locked On Pacers in terms of my listeners trying it and telling me that they absolutely love it. So many great flavors. Really healthy, really delicious. The texture always matches the flavor. My favorite's the peanut butter brownie. They just made a birthday cake puff one that was fantastic. You've got to try them. Most have about 150 calories, 15 grams of protein, only 4 grams of sugar. That's what the granola bars have as well. They come in 3 awesome flavors: chocolate peanut butter, chocolate coconut, and white chocolate berry. You can try all 3 in their mixed box right now as well. Go to Built.com to try Built Bar today. You can get whatever kind you want, a mixed box or one for your favorite flavor. Use the promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your order. That promo code again is LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Let's flip to the weaknesses side. As with every center, some of his weaknesses are kind of limited to his position, which is sort of a bummer in the context of how the NBA is these days, but it's a criticism of players, and that's how it is. And you brought up the big one. I know I talked about long twos and kind of spun it in a little bit of positive light, but 1 3-point attempt. Look, that is what makes Chet like very high. Like, not obviously Chet's like the best defensive prospect since Evan Mobley, which is 1 year ago, but he's an insane defensive prospect, right? Like you can draft him really high anyway, but the fact that he can shoot, like he can do so much in the NBA, that makes him as a center really, really draftable. Duren does not shoot threes. Won the whole season, like you brought up, and it's not something I ever think he'll be confident in doing without a ton of work on the shot, which is really rare outside of like Brook Lopez. How many centers have totally reinvented themselves to be a floor spacer? Like it happens. It's just kind of rare, right? I covered Al Jefferson at the same time. Brook Lopez went from a guy who took 5 threes a season to like 200, and Al Jefferson went from taking 5 threes a season to taking 5. Like some guys, it just doesn't happen. So I think that in the modern NBA, his lack of shooting could end up being something that really hurts him.
I don't see him becoming a 5 to 200 guy. I think he's more a 5 to 5 guy.
Yeah.
If I had to project right now. Obviously, the shooting is going to be an issue as far as what you can get out of him offensively. but I think his even just overall the scoring prowess, if you want to call it that, is lacking right now. It's like even though he does score well and finish, he doesn't really have a ton of post moves either. The footwork on his post moves are kind of worrisome. So the lack of shooting, the lack of post moves, and elite length really does actually give him some trouble. For anybody listening to this, go and watch Memphis versus Gonzaga in the NCAA tournament. He was able to move Chet at will underneath, absolutely buried Chet into the restricted area, and still couldn't get a shot off because Chet's length he didn't have the footwork to create any space with the room that he was able to create with the physicality. So along with the shooting, just kind of the overall offensive, finesse skill part of the game, I've got some concerns right now.
Yeah, but I was told Chet is terrible because he's skinny. So how is that possible? How is this possible?
Yeah,
I think that's one of my
he gets pushed around, so he won't be able to do anything.
It's my least favorite draft cycle take, so I always try to just make it seem belittling and dumb, even though I probably shouldn't do that. Yeah, I agree with all that, and I talked about something earlier. I kind of mentioned it in passing, but I put this in my notes that he goes over both shoulders, and that's like kind of a good thing. He thinks about the reason to do that as a strength, but he also does it a lot because he doesn't have a more complex move to go to, right? Like when he catches, if he takes 2 dribbles, all he thinks about is it's not like a hook shot. It's more like I don't know what to call it. He just turns over his shoulder and puts it up, and it's fine. He finishes well right around the basket. But once you get him outside of like 5 feet or something, actually per CBB analytics, from 4 to 10 feet in the paint, basically, not at the rim, 20 for 44 this season, right? Like that's under 50%. That's not what you want from a guy who's that imposing and should be, in theory, able to create a little bit more advantages in that area. So I agree that shot creation, even though he does have some skill off the dribble and some size, is not necessarily a strength for him.
Yeah, and the lack of touch, kind of especially with that left hand, is an issue. Like I didn't know that, 20 for 44, whatever. But again, that checks out. You pull him away from the goal where he can't dunk on you, and you're able to cause some problems. So I'd say his offensive skill set, if he had to call it something right now, I would still use the word raw. But again, he's 18. He'll be 18 on draft night. And with those physical tools, you're going to have a front office who says, like, we want to bet on him and we want to develop that. So it is an issue right now. But again, like his work ethic, if you can get him to buy in of, hey, like we need to teach you some of the more finesse moves where I know you're used to just being able to overpower and explode and dunk on everybody. That's where you can really unlock kind of that offensive ceiling.
I know we talked about I'm going to compare something you said earlier to ball handling right now, but if a guy is over 20 from 3, at least he's willing to take it as opposed to a guy who's 0 for 0. I talk about his dribbling earlier. It's like he's a guy who's willing to put the ball on the floor and make a play. That said, he also turns it over a ton after he puts it on the floor. Killer turnover rate, almost 20%, almost 1 in 5 team touches. Duren's turning it over. Like that's a big weakness for him, even though I think it's a good thing in general that he does put it on the floor. Like that's good for his development that he's working on that skill and having that baseline. But the results of a lot of those plays are bad. And after watching Heat Celtics last night, where Jalen Brown had his dribble in a blender for half the game and had 6 turnovers, 7, I can't remember. That can be bad. And Jalen Brown came in as a guy with not a good dribbling baseline as a prospect, and he's gotten a lot better at it, obviously. But I don't want to say I'm comparing those players or anything, but being able to dribble and not turn it over does have a lot of value in every setting of the sport, playoff, regular season, title game, whatever. I think it's good that he is working on his handling and trying to create for himself to some extent, but he's got to clean it up. He's got to tighten that handle if he wants to do it at the pro level.
Yeah, and that's where I'm curious to see who picks him, because it will be telling on what they want him to do at the pro level. Sometimes I think we get hung up, we as in not you or anybody in particular, just collectively, sometimes we get hung up on what a player can't do. I don't think Duren's ever going to be asked to initiate any kind of offense on the floor. So yes, he does need to tighten up the handles for sure. But again, like if he doesn't, I don't ever think that'll be a reason you draft him is to create. So I'm not going to put too much stock in that inability right now, because it's probably just not going to be ever anything he gets asked to do in volume.
What do you think of his pick and roll defense?
Again, I think the versatility is what's really special. The fact that he can move so well, recover, actually has pretty good feel, both when he hedges, when he has to blitz, or when he stays down. I think just the overall feel, the speed of the game will take some adjusting. I think just because he is a young guy, sometimes the game can move really, really quick for him, but not enough to where it was worrisome to me. So I think he's going to be a good pick and roll defender, especially with that length.
I think he will be too. there were a lot of times where I thought, oh, he's too high. And then I'd watch more of the game and I'd go, oh, he's too high again. And then I'd watch a little more of the game and I go, oh, he's too high again. And at that point, I was like, wait, do I think he's too high or is that where he's being told to stand? That becomes a problem of like, I can't analyze how this is going. And he recovered fine on almost all those instances. So I agree. I think he'll be a good pick and roll defender, which is incredibly crucial for prospects, especially at the 5 in these draft cycles now. So I think on the defensive side, that's a plus for him. But his team defense in general, sometimes like when he's really far from the play, this is true of like every 18-year-old prospect, but yeah, just totally zones out sometimes. Get back cuts are sometimes a problem for him, and just not a little more upright, catching his breath kind of stuff. And like, yeah, everybody does that, but I still think that's a bad thing. Like you have to in the NBA, there are very few seconds where you can have that happening anymore with teams having more complex offenses and trying to cut more and create advantages anyway. You got to know where your man is at all times. And that is where I think his probably biggest need of growth will be at the pro level on defense.
Yeah, he does take too many plays off.
Yes.
And that's the one concern. That's the biggest concern that I have heard from teams is can you get him to lock in and turn on his motor on both ends every play when he's on the floor? And if you think that your organization can get that out of him, Duren is a guy that I would expect to go high in the draft. The more teams that think, I don't know if I can get him to buy in, not fall asleep on defense in spurts, and be locked in and have that motor on 100% for every play, at that point, I think I could see him falling a little bit. But again, to your point, like the physical tools will allow him to do well if he wants to. And that's what we've got to find out.
A lot of times the motor concerns, at least in early seasons for a prospect, can come down to like, one, do they like the role they have? Because if they do, they'll give it their all in that role. Or two, is their team good? Like if he gets drafted to a team that is playoffs year 1, I think he'll be more engaged, and that motor concern will go away pretty quick because he'll know like, okay, my team is winning. What I'm doing is working. I have to keep doing that. Whereas if he doesn't like his role as much or his team sucks, which is possible, he's getting drafted to a lottery team. Like it could be a little harder to stay engaged all the time. I think that's true for a lot of prospects that come in with motor concerns. So yeah, I think situation where he gets picked, I don't know if I'd go the most, but more so than most of the guys in the top whatever range you have put him in, 14, 12, whatever, will be very, very important, as more so than a lot of these other guys.
As of right now, Matt and I actually have him mocked at number 9 to San Antonio. And that's where I think it would be perfect for him because I think they have one more year of Pirtle, and then I don't think they have any kind of big man or 4 of the future. They have a lot of big wings, ball handling wings, combo guards. I think that they're an organization that can get him to buy in and unlock that full potential. And if you add him to the young Spurs core, again, they already need a forward or center of the future. And that I think is like the best case scenario for him. If he doesn't go there, I look at the team list. I think Charlotte at 13 or 15 can make some sense. But that 9, 13, 15 are the ones for me where it's like, okay, like I think you can go here, be happy in your role fairly early and really lock in because of what they have you doing.
I'd like to thank everyone for, as always, making Locked On Pacers their first listen today and every single day. You mentioned the Spurs, and I only say this as a segue because Pirtle has 1 year left on his deal. Well, guess who else has 1 year left on their deal? That would be Miles Turner. Guess who else has 1 year left on their contract? That'd be Goga Bitadze. So I don't necessarily think the Pacers will be like prioritizing center to the extent that they even care about position in the draft. Like when you're picking really high, sometimes you pick the guy you think's the best. But it's not like insane to me they would pick a center, especially because they could move one of the guys they have. That said, I want to talk more about his NBA fit and then kind of drift towards, when I talk about Pacers fit with a lot of these guys, I say Tyrese Halliburton and Chris Duarte. Does he fit with those two guys? But NBA fit in general to me, where I start with every prospect when I have this discussion is, okay, the game is more spaced out and it's faster. Do your skills allow you to keep up with that or hang in that setting in a way that, in college you might have been able to do something, but once it gets faster and more spacier, can you still do stuff? And so on offense, I don't think the speed will necessarily hurt him because he's got the physical tools to do it. And if he's just a lob guy or, a good hands offensive rebound machine, yeah, I think like Isaiah Stewart translated really fast. Not that they're comparable players, but, those kind of skills help the Beefs to translate really fast. But on defense, where, like we mentioned earlier, he can sometimes be a step out of the play and have to recover. Like, yeah, I think he'll get better at that stuff, but I think it could take longer for him to have a strong defensive impact because when the game gets faster, those recoveries will get tougher. So I think his translation to the NBA is I would say pretty good, but there are some concerns I have on the defensive end especially.
Yeah, it's the reads that are going to speed up for him right off the bat. Like you said, I don't think the physical aspect or athleticism aspect will be too much for him. I mean, even on day one, I think he's going to come out one of the more like one of the more physical and physically ready guys on the floor in any gym. But reading the pick and rolls, I think falling asleep sometimes, maybe getting back cut, or things even right in front of him, maybe he's going to have to adjust to that speed and the reaction and processing speed. That's gonna take a little bit of time for sure.
Do you think he can play the 4 at all at the pro level?
I do, but it's if you trust him to take those mid-range and long twos and eventually stretch the floor. Otherwise, I think just a 5.
Yeah, so I don't know if you know Adam Spinella very well, but he was the first person who put me on this theory of your position is what you guard. That's what you are. And so I do think it's possible he could guard 4s in the NBA. And for that reason, I'll say, yeah, it's possible that he could be a 4. No lower on the positional hierarchy, obviously, but I think it's possible he could defend 4s. And that makes it a little more palatable to me that he could be a little like have that versatility and be a 10-foot and out guy on offense. Shouldn't shoot, but it won't kill you to that on that end of the floor. And that makes me a little more bullish on his NBA fit because I think if he's able to switch a little bit and guard more guys than just the 5, because you're really sticking him in one role in that case, then I think that you got something there. You got a versatile guy who obviously can be really imposing, and if he's with 4s, he can be really imposing. That's why I wouldn't say I'm like stupid high on him, but I'm pretty high on his skills in general, just because he's so physically imposing and has some versatility. And I think at the NBA level, that'll be really valuable.
I think by year 2 or 3 in the league, I think he switches 3 through 5 just fine. I don't think the mobility is going to be an issue guarding 3s. I don't want him necessarily switched on guards all the time. Again, as with 99% of bigs, that's going to be an issue. But I wouldn't even limit him to just 4s. I think he's got more defensive upside almost into the 3s as well. I mean, just watch him run the floor. Again, those physical tools, right. You just have to work at it. He's still a kid. And, if he was 20 and a half, 21, at that point, I'm like, okay, maybe he is a little bit more, already what he's going to be. But at 18 and a half, I'm not going to put him in even that 4 to 5 box. I think we're probably looking 3 to 5 as far as switchability on the floor.
How many big men that run like a gazelle in the last 5 years have been like not good in the NBA? Like it's really rare, right, for those bigs who have that mobility to really like not find a niche, at least in the NBA. Maybe they don't all live up to their draft positions, but they all find a role that they can play and succeed in at the pro level. And Duren's got that. He is quick. He's beaten some guards up the floor sometimes when he's running. And Penny Hardaway didn't run like all NBA stuff, but they ran some NBA stuff. Like they made him move and be that level of player, which I think is fascinating for him in the NBA. Let's talk about the Pacers specifically to the extent that we even can, because NBA teams change so fast these days. But I think Halliburton specifically, the new Pacers alpha, the guy's going to have the ball all the time. Pretty good offensive match. Very good offensive match, really. As a guy who can throw strong passes to a guy with good hands who has some ability to overpower guys in the post. I like that. Duren's a good screener, especially because of his physical profile. I like that offensive fit quite a bit. And again, in transition, that gazelle-like mobility will be very helpful next to a guy who is brilliant in transition and can see the whole floor. The defensive end, I am lower on Halliburton's defense than most these days, and I'd be a little concerned about that. I think they would need to find a way to shrink the floor if that was their focus on the defensive end. They'd have to kind of gimmick things up a little bit with the rest of their guys. That's possible. They have some versatile defenders in Duarte and Jackson, but I think if he does come to the Pacers, if Duren does, first of all, that will tip that they're about to trade like 2 or 3 players. But second of all, I think that it would take a little bit of time for the Pacers to figure out how to maximize him with their team. And I don't even think they'd pick him at 6. They'd have to move back a little bit for me to think they would do that. Maybe they would. But I would think that fit is interesting, but it would take a little longer for it to kind of materialize.
Yeah, I wouldn't pick him at 6. I don't see any world where
I wouldn't
that really does happen. Now, trading out of, again, if I'm the Pacers, I'm not moving the pick. Like I'm taking either, Sharp or Murray, probably if one of them are there. But there's going to be teams who want Sharp, want Murray, and want Dyson Daniels. And if somebody really wants to get him, at that point, 6 is an interesting pick to shop at that point. So I don't think trading back is totally out of the picture if someone wants one of those other guys like really, really badly. What's interesting looking at the Pacers roster, like you said, Turner has one more year. You said Goga has one more year as well. I would be excited at the proposition of having Isaiah Jackson at my 4 and Jalen Duren at my 5.
Defense everywhere.
You've got some
Speed.
serious length, athleticism, and
Yeah.
speed there, and neither of them have to carry a big offensive load because of the guards you have. I mean, just lobs for days, shots getting swatted left and right. Like, again, I don't know how that looks to let Turner and Goga go at the end of this year, trade them, whatever. But the theory of those two together is actually really exciting.
Yeah, you can say what you want about their positions overlapping, whatever. I think Toronto proved this year, like, you can easily get away with it. As long as they can do enough on one end, you can easily get away with it. It does not take that much creativity for long, rangy, speedy 4-5s to play together. The Raptors did it like 40 minutes a game. So, yeah, I agree with that. And I think a lot of, just to close this out with a trade discussion, because that's what everybody wants to hear about, apparently. I don't, but whatever. Murray, I think, is kind of the swing point here. If the Pacers view Murray as like, yes, this is the sixth best player or fifth or whatever, Murray's sharp. If they view him in that tier of the top six for sure, then they probably pick. But if they say, okay, we kind of have Murray in this tier with Matherin and AJ Griffin and whoever else, Dyson Daniels, are in that 6 through 10 range, then they'd be more susceptible to moving back. So that is kind of the key point for them in making the decision of where they end up picking, to me, assuming things go as everybody has surmised so far. So yeah, Keegan Murray, I already did his episode, but ironically, the evaluation of him and where he goes, or where him and Shaden go, that the 5-6 most commonly mocked, could dictate a lot about the Pacers' plans in this draft.
Yeah, especially if you can get another asset or a future first. Like if somebody wants to go up there and give you maybe an unprotected first for next year, plus their first now, I mean, next year's draft is pretty loaded. So you have to kind of entertain how much do we value Murray or Sharp versus 2 firsts. If I'm the Pacers, I mean, it would take a ton for me to move because I'll take either one of those guys at 6. I think 6 is a real sweet spot because one of them is going to fall to you. 7 is kind of a worrisome spot in this year's draft because the guys that I'm really high on have a chance to go 1 through 6 and be gone. But I think the Pacers spot, I wouldn't move unless you just get kind of like the Godfather offer where you look in your round and you go, hey guys, like we kind of have to take this.
We will see what they do. They have not been in a position like this for, again, 3 decades. Last time they picked less than 10 was 1989. Most people still are just like, how is that possible? Derek, thank you very much for the time today. Much appreciated as we wade through these prospects here on Locked On Pacers. I mentioned it at the beginning, but where can people follow you and all your work covering every draft, every player, some I've never even heard of this year and every year?
Yeah, my Twitter is just my name, D Murray Hoops. You can find it there on my account. You can find basketball news. My boss, Matt Babcock, his stuff as well. We're going to be up at the draft in New York later next month. We've got some pre-draft workouts coming out, some more player reviews, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, we're cranking out everything we can. We're under 30 days to go. And again, Tony, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciated it.
That's the first time I've heard someone say we're under 30 days. Today, someone said the lottery was 9 days ago. It feels like 2 lifetimes ago. Yeah. Like the time just gets so muddled for me between the lottery and the draft. Derek, thank you very much for the time. Everybody, this show is at Locked On Pacers on Twitter. If you want to yell at me for saying something dumb, at TEastNBA is the way to go for that. Have a great weekend. If you're in Indy, enjoy the 500. If you're able to have a 3-day weekend because of Memorial Day, enjoy your time off. And we will see you on Monday.